Now you don't necessarily have to take this off, but it does make it much easier to get back there. If you loosen up this clamp right here with an 8mm or a flathead screwdriver, and then over on the other side you'll have a 10mm headed bolt. Start loosening those up, get the bolt out of there, we'll get this right out of the way. Okay friends, to get started on our ignition coil, we need to get over on the passenger side of the engine right by where the transmission dipstick is. If you were to follow this down, you're going to see where your coil wire is. Let's go ahead and take that off of there, give it a nice twist to break it free, and of course inspect it to make sure it's in great condition. I'm going to go ahead and set this right aside for now, and now we'll move along to disconnecting the wiring harness that leads to the coil itself. There's a little tab right here, go ahead and pull up on that, and then carefully draw up on the wiring itself. I always like to take a peek at my electrical connectors and make sure that there's no funny colors. If there is, it needs to be addressed. Assuming it's good, we'll set that aside. That's going to lead us over here to our control module. You want to, of course, do the same thing with that. Go ahead and lift up on the tab. We'll pop off that wiring harness and quickly inspect it. This looks great as well. We'll set that aside as well. Now that we have all the wiring disconnected, we need to continue on by looking at the bracket that's going to be holding the coil to the engine. The bracket is going to come from over here, down along underneath this wiring harness, and then over to there. Essentially, we want to go ahead and release the tabs that are holding the wire to that. If you were to just take a small pocket screwdriver, you can get right in between here, give it a nice little twist, and it should want to pop free. Go ahead and make sure that you get the wiring harness so it's unsecured from this bracket, and then we'll start removing it. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the 3 mounting bolts for this. There's going to be one located right here, one pretty close to it, and then all the way back here, there's going to be one more. I'm going to start with the one that's hardest to get to. Use a little swivel with an extension. So next we need to remove the bracket that holds our coil down to the engine. There's going to be 2 nuts up here. There's one right there, one right where that coil wire was, and then all the way on the back where you can see my wrench leading down to on the back of the engine, there's a 15mm nut. You need to go ahead and remove all of those. Right, now with everything loose, we can move this top bracket out of the way, and that exposes the 2 studs that are coming out of the same area where we just removed those 2 nuts from over here. There's going to be 1 stud here, 1 stud right there. Go ahead and get those out of the way, and then we can get the bracket with the coil right off of here. And grab that coil with the bracket and get it right out of here. So now we have the ignition coil and the bracket out of the truck. Alright, so now with this whole unit out of the truck, we need to remove the coil from the bracket. You're going to notice you have 2 pins that come through. We need to go ahead and cut those out of there, and then we're going to replace it with some brand new bolts. Now I'm just going to use a nice punch, try to drive this through. There it is, friends. So now it's going to be time to mount our new coil onto our original bracket. What you're going to notice is, of course, you cut out the original mounting pieces, so you're going to need to get yourself a couple bolts, some washers, and of course some nuts. It's a good idea to have a little bit of blue thread locker along the way as well. Now when we go to install this, what you want to pay attention to is the area where the wires are going to connect onto. You're going to see that they both are going to line up in the same area. Go ahead and take the other aspect of the bracket, put it on here. We're going to line up all the holes, and then we're going to use some new mounting hardware. When you do this, you want to make sure you have washers for both sides of this, and of course, if you don't have locking nuts, you want to make sure that you use a little bit of thread locker. Slide this through there. There's one. I've got my bolts through, a little bit of thread locker. Let's go ahead and put on those nuts, and then we'll snug them up. Now let's just go ahead and snug them up. There we are. Okay, they're both snugged up. Let's go ahead and get ready for our install into the truck. Let's go ahead and come on over here. Now we're going to move this top bracket out of the way, so of course we can start in our lower bracket, which is the one that has the coil and everything attached right to it. Go ahead and line up the holes, start in both of your bolts that have the little studs on them like this, and then we'll continue. With both of them started, let's go ahead and snug them up. That's bottomed out. Teeny bit more, that's good. Do the same over here. Bottomed out. A little bit. Now let's go ahead and put on that top bracket. Make sure that the top bracket lines up with both of your mounting studs. After that, go ahead and start on both nuts and then snug them up as well. That nut's bottomed out. Teeny bit more. Do the same to the other one as well. Bottomed out. Now that we have the other bracket nuts tight, let's go ahead and put on this one that was on the rear of the engine that holds the bracket to the engine. Before we go ahead and put on our coil wire, let's just add a little bit of dielectric grease to this. That's going to help keep moisture out of that generalized area. I also like to use a little bit of dielectric right inside here where my connector is, and then of course I'll just go ahead and put some on the other connector as well. Now let's go ahead and connect in our wires. Let's take this reddish orange looking one, put it right here. Make sure it's clipped in. Now we have our other one. Let's go ahead and connect that in as well. Nice little wiggle. That feels perfect. Now any of these areas that you might have moved around and they came loose, just make sure everything's re-secured. Any of these clips that we took apart, make sure you clip those back in. That's going to make sure that the wiring stays where it's supposed to be and it does not get damaged in any way. Okay friends, now it's time to get this back on here. Just something I'm going to mention real quick is you're going to have your clamp, and then over on this side you should have that mounting bolt. Ours was broken, so I don't necessarily have the bolt, but I'm just going to go ahead and slide this right on here. Line it up so the mounting bolt's here. Go ahead and start that in. We're going to move along to snugging this up, and then of course we'll snug up that as well. Okay, so everything's back together and it looks amazing. The next thing that you want to do is go ahead and start up your truck. You're going to pay attention to see if you have any check engine light. Assuming you don't, go ahead and take it for a road test.